Yeah, as a showman. Yeah.
And as we know, Rockney's family came here during that. He was a carriage maker. That's Knut Rockney for anybody out there.
Can you?
And the term White City originated with the. Am I correct?
Yeah.
Which later was used for the amusement park.
Yeah. Yeah.
And had nothing to do with the fair, really.
There came a movie here not too long ago about that doctor.
Yeah.
Are they making one?
Hmm?
Are they going to make a movie about that? Or?
No, they did.
Did they?
Did they?
Did make a movie about the doctor that
Were they-
was
Devil in the White City?
The
serial
devil and-
killer.
Yeah. You know what else came out of there was the fairgrounds themselves. The buildings were in Jackson Park, but they realized that they had to have entertainment, and they wanted to bring people from all over the world, people from an Eskimo, people from Africa, from various Indonesia. So they set up the entertainment on the Midway Plaisance, and the term the Midway came from that.
Right.
And today the Midway is the usually the main roadway down either a fair or like a state fair or
Circus.
a circus, an amusement park. It's always called the Midway.
Midway.
That's from the Midway Plaisance. Yeah. You're very good at that. Yeah.
A good Republican.
Yeah. And there was a lot of attractions on the Midway. Little Egypt did her dance there, and
Well, Sally Wren, that was in 1933,
that was
though, right?
33,
Yeah.
34, yeah. But it was a takeoff on that, and lots of so people and you mentioned the White City. There was more electricity in Jackson Park than there were in the rest of the city. And that's where Edison was touting DC, but Tesla came in with AC, and they started the AC. So
That's right.
and you can imagine people coming from a small town, 20, 30, 40,000 or less, and they say, we don't have a street light, we don't have electricity, and look at this whole place is lit up.
It was kind of like looking at the world of the future to them, wasn't it?
It was, and
That was the whole
there was the whole idea.
the whole idea of
Yeah,
it. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
God.
And again, 1893 is another year of depression. There's another economic panic. Although by 1893 they were calling them depressions. And again, Chicago was lucky because they had the World's Fair, and that attracted so much tourism that it supported the city's economy. So once again, the city was lucky.
We don't call them that no more, do we?
No.
Don't
But
dare
I
to.
think for 1893 they had coined the term depression. You begin to see the term depression
Yeah.
used for 1893.
And all kind of first came out of there.
You know what else? Pabst Blue Ribbon.
Pabst Blue Ribbon. They
Pabst
got the
Blue
blue
Ribbon.
ribbon there.
Yeah.
The first commemorative.
What do you have?
What do you have? Pabst Blue Ribbon. What do you have? The first commemorative coin, Colombian $50. The first commemorative stamps. La Rabida Sanitarium was then sanitarium. Now it's a children's hospital. Is established there. They had made a replica of the convent that Columbus stayed in while the ships were being built, and he stayed at La Rabida, and the hospital is still out there. The lagoons, some of the bridges. They're still.
So it did leave some lasting benefit to the city.
Some lasting benefits, and that the wooded island is still there. There's some Japanese, not original, but the temple, Japanese temple, which was destroyed during World War II, by the way. Somebody had to go in there and set fire to it. I bet, yeah. And the fire department could not. They had to walk in, and they could not drive a fire truck onto the. Yeah. The Wooden Island is strictly.
Is that open to the public? Can you?
Yes.
I'm not-
Oh, yeah.
Can you go there?
Yeah. There's a bridge. There are bridges there. So, and of course the big thing is the the Museum of Science and Industry. That building had to be built solid because they asked for art objects from around the world, and people are not going to send a valuable painting or sculpture into a building that is temporary. It could collapse, or the temperature, humidity, etc. They had the first intramural elevated line. We extended the L out to 63rd and Stony Island, and then you got into a open air car. So they had already had electric motors on there. So it was the beginning of lots of
new era.
Yeah, lots of great displays out there,
It's quite a research to be done, quite an interesting
Yeah.
Was,
research.
Ken, was Museum of Science and Industry, that building, had that, a lot of the displays that are now in the Field Museum, were they in there, those animals that were taken, and
I don't think so.
I thought they were. It was,
Yeah,
those date back, they were built,
Yeah,
older, you know.
it could be. You know, it's funny you mention that because the Field Museum moved into the Palace of Fine Arts, and they were there until they moved to Roosevelt.
Oh, did they?
Yeah.
Maybe that's what it was.
Maybe they did have. I don't, you know. But and then the building was vacant and sort of fell apart until Rosenwald put money into it and opened around the time of the Century of
Julius Rosenwald.
We
Yeah.
never
Chairman-
called it anything else but Rosenwald. Let's go to the
Yeah,
Rosenwald.
Rosenwald Museum.
Chairman of the board,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
chairman of the board of Sears Roebuck.
Yes, yeah, and he lived on the south side of Chicago. He lived in Hyde Park. I don't know exactly
Well,
what his address.
There's the building at 47th and Michigan that bears his name. It's built like a court. It's beautifully built. I see it's being refurbished now. I was by there
Is it?
recently.
That's
And
good.
Joe Lewis had lived there at one time too, and it's like, it's all around the outside, and in the middle is this courtyard, and it's just,
Classic
Yeah.
architecture.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
beautiful, yeah.
Yeah, he wanted to, I think he spent a lot of money with black schools for the black children, African-American communities, you know, and he was very generous. And he's the one that brought Sears out of the sort of the catalog business into stores. You know, they didn't have retail stores before
Yeah.
he took over, you know.
Yeah.
And very farsighted. And I think he died around 1932, so I don't know if he ever visited his museum, you know.
He had to be a guy like this Jobs that just died from Apple.
Yeah.
You know, what
Yeah.
a mind that guy had.
Yeah,
you know,
unbelievable.
Yeah.
changed the world.
Yeah.
The funny thing is, the odd thing is that a lot of people who made these big fortunes never set out to do it. They just set out to do a certain thing a better way.
Yeah.
And I guess maybe there's a little wisdom to that.
Yeah, yeah.
To
Yeah,
do
well,
it in the right direction.
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
Who would ever think
Have you guys watched this Channel 11 about Prohibition?
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Very, very. And they just replayed the whole thing. I think it was yesterday
Yeah.
or over
No,
the
I
weekend.
missed it, and I
Oh,
should
Ken,
have.
it's really...
Very well done.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
All of Ken Burns.
Lucky Luciano visited Chicago. Says it's a goddamn crazy place or something.
And, you know, for history, it really, when it starts out, it really shows you how political problems are solved and not solved.
I was going to say, with what they call it, unanticipated results.
What
or
really came out of it that I had never
Unintended
understood,
consequences.
unintended
when the
consequences. That's it.
18th Amendment was enacted, most people did not think that it was going to ban beer and wine and brandy. They only thought it applied to distilled spirits, to
Alcohol,
liquor.
Liquor.
right.
And they were shocked then when the Volstead Act. I always wondered what was the need for the Volstead Act. You had the amendment. The Volstead Act was the iron-fisted, absolutely nothing, no
Spelled
beer
it
and
out.
wine.
Yeah.
And you wonder if they had limited it only to whiskey and spirits, if maybe it might not have been the
Well,
complete
shades
failure that it was.
of today's world is that the beer, the alcohol was the tax on that was a third of the budget that ran this country,
Yeah, yeah.
and that's what stopped.
Well, history
When the
of,
Volstead Act was passed, we were going broke.
history of
Well, did that encourage
See, the
the
income
yeah,
tax
income
had been
tax
enacted
then?
a few
Yeah.
years earlier.
But-
And that was what made it possible for them to do away
fact,
with
there
the
was.
revenue
Yeah.
from liquor.
wasn't that supposed to be temporary too?
Oh, yeah, it
Yeah.
was temporary.
Temporary.
No, that Ken Burns is unbelievable, that
Yeah.
guy, what he puts together. I mean, it's just not on Prohibition, it's about everything else.
Well, I saw something on the History Channel or something like history of the United States. Our move west from the eastern seaboard was all a history of people trying to outrun these revenuers. What was Elliot Ness? But Snuffy Smith called him a revenuer, right? That's what he was, a
And
revenuer.
here's the thing: in the entire program, they never once
Mentioned
mentioned
them.
Elliot Ness,
Yeah.
the Untouchables. There was no. They talked about Capone
Yeah.
and Chicago and the gangland, the Johnny Torrio and all these names. never mentioned.
An awful lot
as-
of people you never heard of either, in all these different parts of the country. Eh?
Yeah, and then yet they emphasized how the importance of New York City. That,
Yeah.
that was really the city where they had the trouble enforcing prohibition.
Like they said, I think Alistair Cook said this years ago on his America show. He said, rather than being the mother of temperance, it was the mother of organized crime.
Right. You know, it's funny, you said something about New York City and the problem, enforcing it. They didn't enforce it.
No, they didn't.
That's why there was no problem.
These two former vaudevillians, Izzy and Mo, got famous. I mean, Gleason and Carney made a TV movie about
Well,
them.
that was
They had
a-
how many thousands of arrests? Well, gee, do you think? Could they walk down one block and get a few here and then never come back?
Yeah.
In New York City?
You know, that movie, the St. Valentine's Day Massacre.
Oh, the 60s movie?
Yeah, Capone, in the prelude, they said, there are 12,000 taverns in Chicago. It's illegal. We only got 12,000 of them. Nobody knows about them. Nobody shuts them down, you know. And,
That was
just
a pretty good picture,
the
much better than I
crazy.
thought.
And of course, Cicero, has its own place in history because Capone moves out
That's
there.
why
He
John
moves
was so interested in watching this, because Cicero was
Cicero, yeah.
very well represented in
Represented.
this.
It's, to be realistic, Cicero's a footnote. I mean, if Capone had only controlled the little town of Cicero, no one would have ever heard of him.
No.
It was
No.
the power that he had in the
But that's what
city.
he brought out in the show, that he was happy, he was crazy for publicity.
Yes,
So
that's
we know.
what he said
And-
at the end.
You know what he said one time, just to show you what a nice guy. He said, "Kind words and a gun will give you more results than just kind words alone." So
Yep.
he understood the human nature.
I'll have you know that his son was supposed to have gone to St. Rita for a while, my alma mater. So,
Ooh, Sonny, huh?
so people talk about James T. Farrell or
Yeah.
whoever else at Carmel. Well,
There was a guy mentioned in there, King Solomon, and I didn't know, but we used to have a King Solomon at the racetrack, and he was a bum, he was a hood, and I guess whether he was related, I got to look that up to see if he was related to that guy. But brought back a lot of memories.
Ed O'Hare was running, was it Sportsman's Park for him, and he was did a dog
Yep.
when it was a dog track, and he eventually he turns in Capone because he went to a lot of meetings, knew about the money, kept books. That's what really put Capone away, not Elliot Ness. And then the trade-off is send my son to an academy, and he goes to Naval Academy. And of course, he shoots down 5 or 6 Japanese bombers.
Yeah.
What was this?
Butch
Oh, it's Butch O'Hare?
Butch O'Hare,
Yeah.
and we got an airport named for him. In fact, I saw one time it said, he grew up in Chicago. I don't even know if he was ever visited Chicago. He grew up in St. Louis. That's where Ed O'Hare was from, and his dad. And he might have visited here on a bond drive. Or
No,
something.
but I've told the story. It was the Chicago Tribune that secured the fact that would be known as O'Hare Field.
Oh yeah.
Because it was originally intended to be named in honor of George C. Marshall, who was the Chief of Staff of the United States Army. And when Colonel McCormick heard that there was going to be an airfield called Marshall Field,
Oh.
the owner of the Times, his
Times.
rival,
the son.
McCormick had a fit and said, so he started the drumbeat, and of course he didn't like Marshall to begin with. He started the drumbeat to name him for a genuine bona fide war hero, a combat officer. So that's why it winds up O'Hare
that what-
Field,
yeah.
because
It was
because
Orchard
Colonel-
Field before or
Colonel
something.
McCormick was not going to sit still to have everybody coming to Chicago and landing at Marshall Field.
Isn't that funny? I mean, it
Marshall Field started the Chicago Sun like the first week in December. It was supposed to be a counterbalance to the Republican Tribune.
Tribune.
So along comes the war. Everybody's got to be united. So
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
of course later it merged with the Times, as we know.
Sometimes, yeah, it was
so.
the
Yeah.
Sun at that time, but
Yeah.
it was already considered a rival by McCormick, and I think in terms of business too, I don't think the McCormicks and the Fields were on the same page to begin with.
Just the notion of having another paper in the morning like that would be too
Yeah.
much
Sure.
Yeah.
for the
Why
colonel.
did they name
and,
it McCormick? He was a hero.
Well, you've got, after his death, you do get McCormick Place. I mean, you get this
Yeah.
big exposition hall.
Cantini out there?
And that was the Tribune. After the death of McCormick, the Tribune promoted that. So
And that
it would
was
be
not
named
the
in his honor.
original name of that airport either.
Douglas Airport.
Pardon?
Douglas Field.
Douglas, an orchard?
Orchard.
Oh, yeah.
Orchard. When we
why it
moved
says
out there,
ORD.
I
That's
only
why
lived
ORD.
2 blocks
ORD.
from there.
Yeah.
It was Orchard.
It still says on International, doesn't ORC or something?
ORD.
Yeah, ORD.